Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business leaders and real estate experts. Past guests include Jay Connor, talking about raising private money in this tough interest rate environment, and Darren Huang, who has 100 units under management and a host of other industrial properties. Today's episode is brought to you by Chris Lyle State Farm. Chris Lyle State Farm helps you protect your most precious assets and investments, whether it's your home and auto, investment, rental properties, or other valuables. Call Chris Lyle State Farm for a quick and painless phone call to potentially save you double digits on all of your insurance needs. Visit diallyle.com or call his office at 918-878-7771. Today's episode is also brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of real estate ownership. Visit KeyrenterPMC.com or email us at info@KeyrenterPMC.com for more info. A huge shout out to Kathy Portley, the president of the Tulsa Real Estate Investors Association, for introducing us to today's guest. Max McGuirk is a former high school teacher who's been investing in real estate since he was 21 years old with long-term rentals. He's a serial entrepreneur, owns and operates a DJ and photo booth company in Tulsa, and was under contract and wrestled for the WWE after college in their developmental territory of Tampa, Florida in 2009 and 2010. Max joined McGraw Commercial Properties this year, specializing in the disposition, acquisition, and leasing of office buildings, industrial properties, and land. Max McGuirk, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's a great Tuesday, a little bit of rain, but it's a wonderful day.
We need it. We need the rain. It's been dry for a while. I'm happy to have it. Tell me, let's start. I want to hear the entirety of your history. You've got such a fascinating history, but I want to start with you wrestling WWE after college. I had no idea that you did this, but I want to ask, is WWE, do you need wrestling skills to actually be in the WWE, or is it just entertainment and showmanship?
You got to be an athlete, and so yeah, I'm going to say yes on the athletic side. So I was, let's just say, I wrestled since I was 5 years old, but I was around the wrestling stuff since before I was born. So I like to say this is kind of like a blip on the radar. So this is not like how I made my money and how I got into real estate and stuff like that.
But you were getting paid, right? I mean, when you did WWE, you got paid. Okay,
absolutely. Weekly, paid by Vince McMahon. So no, it was cool.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
that's awesome.
My Stamford, Connecticut. Yeah. So I can share some pictures and stuff later, but man, just to kind of give you like just a brief depiction of my childhood. When I grew up, my mom started working for WWF, World Wrestling Federation, back in 1985. I was born in 85. And so she was on the road traveling with like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, all those guys. So I grew up, those guys were like basically like my aunts and uncles, like we'd be hanging out in the back and, like mind your P's and Q's or these guys are going to beat you up, and so
I'll keep you in line.
Oh yeah. I got held back my first grade year because I missed 82 days of school.
Oh my God.
Because my mom would just be everywhere. And it was a blast. And so I don't think a lot of my friends were like, there's no way you're out there. And I'm like getting pictures with Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and stuff like that. So it was a cool childhood. My mom got off the road probably in 95. But we were all very well connected in that. My grandfather before that was a national champion wrestler at Oklahoma A&M that later became OSU. Back in the 30s, he got into professional wrestling. He actually was a promoter. Cool. And so he promoted his territory, but back in the day, he had the Northeast Territory, Northwest, Central States. So he had like Oklahoma, I want to say Louisiana, and Arkansas. And so anyway, so he had that territory from the 50s to the 70s.
In the promotion, from like a promotion perspective.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So he was promoting the territory basically in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana back in the day. A gentleman named Bill Watts had worked for him as a wrestler, and then ended up buying my grandfather out and turned that into Mid-South, which is a big territory. And that later got purchased by Ted Turner, which became WCW. So anyway, all that ended up getting purchased by Vince. And so anyway, so my mom started working for Vince 85. So when I was born till 95, she's on video games. She's on a bunch of like,
Her voice is on video games, like announcing the wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was just somebody had sent me something on social media the other day, and it was my mom announcing a match for a guy named Earthquake. And
That's
so anyway,
awesome.
it's cool. So yeah, so I grew up around that as a kid, and then I would go to shows whenever I was younger, but it was completely off the radar until I graduated college. So I wrestled amateur wrestling from 5 years old till I graduated high school. Didn't want to go to college just because I thought I knew better, and so I went to Northeastern in Tahlequah.
Hmm.
And the day I graduated in 3.5 years with an accounting degree. And I'll never forget the day I graduated. My mom was like, "Hey, do you want to go train?" And I was like, "Sure," but she wanted to make sure that I had a college degree first. And so anyway, so I did that. I trained with a guy that was he had wrestled for my grandfather many, many years ago. And so anyway, I trained with him on the weekends while I was an accountant during the week. I went everywhere: Dallas, Texas, Denver, Houston, and I just kind of learned the independent. You talk about, did you get paid? Back then it would be like $5, $25, whatever. You were just lucky to have a place that you could perform in front of.
Yeah.
Jim Ross is a guy, the guy with the big black hat. He was an announcer for WWE for quite a while. He's from Westville, Oklahoma, and he actually got his start from my grandfather, probably 70s, I guess, as a referee. And a lot of these guys back in the day just wanted to be part of the business. Like, I don't care if I'm the referee or I'm putting up the ring or taking tickets. It was like, it's kind of like not a carnival, but like the Tulsa State Fair. They just want to be a part of it. So Jim Ross got his start from my grandfather by being a referee. And then, he'd drive my grandfather around because my grandfather lost his sight as he got older. And so anyway, Jim Ross ended up becoming a really, really big deal, like head of talent relations for WWE.
Wow.
So while I was training on the weekends and traveling and wrestling at shows for independents, I'd reached out to Jim Ross, and Jim Ross got me a tryout back in 2009 in Tampa, Florida, where they had it was called Florida Championship Wrestling, and that was their developmental territory. But it was, you're paid every single week by WWE, and they're molding you, and you're wrestling 5 nights a week to basically be the next Hulk Hogan, John Cena, whatever. And those guys were there all the time. I'd see Triple H and Vince would come down.
Wow.
We would do Thursday night tapings. We'd have 3 hours, so 3 weeks of tapings in one day. And anyway, it was awesome. Dusty Rhodes was the American Dream was our like promos coach. And so anyway, it was a lot of fun. It was 13, 14 years ago. I got hired out of 100 people across the world at this tryout, and 3 of us got picked. Not picked, but basically like we had good athletic skill and a good look. And anyway.
What did you weigh in at? What did you weigh in at back in the day?
Man, I'll have to send you some pictures. Back then I was 220.
Wow.
And I'm talking, it was a full-time job, man. It was a full-time job to eat like 7 meals a day, because you would train for like 6-8 hours during the day. And then we'd be in a different town in Florida. And, we would wrestle at like parking lots of car dealerships. We'd wrestle at like armories. Sometimes we'd be like in a big venue and have like 2,500, 3,000 people. It was wild.
But you're also a decent Greco-Roman wrestler, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Yeah. And some of these guys weren't, man. I'll tell you, like, some of these guys would just be like models. They'd be like 6'8", 300 pounds, like ripped, and they had no athletic ability except how to lift weight, So I was a good amateur wrestler, which made the transition to professional wrestling a whole lot easier for me. The concept I always get, like, man, is this fake? Man, to tell you the truth, the outcome is predetermined. Yeah. If Matt and you and I are wrestling, Vince is like, here's the story I want told. Max is going to go over, and you guys got to tell a 6-minute story and get the crowd invested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you got to do that 5 days a week, right? NFL players, they play once every 7 days. Professional wrestler, you get beat up 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I had some concussions, a torn ACL, and all kinds of stuff. Man. And that transitioned to me to a different path in my lifetime. So
yeah, what did you do directly after wrestling?
Man, so I actually bought my first house before I went to WWE. I bought my first house waiting tables for 3 years. I saved all of my money. I bought a house. I still have it. It's in Bowman Acres.
What inspired you to save your money and buy a house? Something must have. catalyzed that?
Yeah. So my mom, my mom's a real estate agent. She's had her license all throughout the time she was with WWF. My grandmother had her license, and they were always trying to talk me into buying a house. But like thinking about an $80,000 house when you're 17, 18 years old was like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
So I didn't like the thought of having to pay for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, man, I want to buy a house. And so I stayed on my buddy's floor for 2 to 3 years on the weekends when I'd wait tables, lived at home during the week when I was in college. And so I said, you know what? I got $64,000. I was able to buy a house in a crazy market in 2007. And it's been a rental. It's paid for itself a couple times over. But that was kind of why I chose that was I didn't want to pay rent. I didn't want to waste money.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my first house then. I graduated college 6 months later. I was able to get a mortgage for my second house. And then, like I said, I got the call from Jim Ross, and I had quit my job. And for the next 2 years, I was in Tampa, Florida. So,
and what were you earning on an annual basis doing WWE?
Oh, man, I actually, to be honest with you, took a little bit of a pay cut from my accounting job. I'm gonna call it in the 50,000 range.
Okay, fine.
So, but it was enough to survive on. But like, man, we had so many like things. If you got hurt in the ring, you were covered, right? I get kicked in the face and had stitches or whatever, I'm covered. Free of cost. I'm the first one. Like I get to urgent care or get to the hospital front of the line. I'm playing basketball with you at my apartment and I blow out an ACL, you might as well be fired. Like you're done.
Yeah.
So they didn't want you having any other job. So it was cool that I had a rental back home in Tulsa while I was living in Florida. So I had a little extra income.
Yeah.
But basically what they were doing is they're molding you to be the next breakout star so that you're on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or whatever. And then you get a different contract. You're making more money, and then you're merchandise sales and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I didn't get that far.
So you get your second house, you get a mortgage for your second house. Did you follow through with that and buy a second house?
I did. Yeah. It actually is the house behind mine right now. So
love that. So you have two houses, you transition out of WWE. What takes you deeper into the real estate world?
Yeah. So I get back home, and it's kind of one of those things, you're mid-20s and you're like, gosh, like I was on top of the world and all that kind of stuff. But do I go back? Do I change like my character and continue to put on more weight and be more jacked, and this is going to be my life path? Or do I, say, man, I'm going to figure something out here in Oklahoma. You got to have failures, right? So when I get the phone call from WWE and they're like, hey man, we're releasing you. It was devastating, right? You're like, this is kind of like my dream. I grew up around this.
Yeah.
But you got to have some kind of setback sometimes that'll set you up for your next success. Sure. And that's kind of where I went from there. So this is 2010, 2011, middle of a recession. Nobody's answering job, applications and stuff. So I start substitute teaching.
Okay.
And part of it, like the thought was Grand Lake was a really big, important part of my life. And so I thought, well, if I become a school teacher, I'll have 2 months off in the summertime. And I can enjoy the lake and enjoy sunshine, be on a boat. And so that was kind of the path I went. So I had a bachelor's degree in accounting. I took the teacher certification test, subbed for the spring. And then I ended up taking a job at Bartlesville High School. And so I was a high school teacher teaching business, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, programming, that kind of stuff.
Coaching wrestling or no?
Yeah, I coached wrestling. Yeah,
okay,
I coached wrestling. I did. And that was going to be my path. And anyway, so that's what I did. So I did 3 years there, and an opportunity to cut that drive down. It was 45-minute drive every single day.
Wow.
To Bartlesville, because I was like, I'm not going to move there. So had an opportunity with my assistant principal, moved to Claremore. They said, hey, there's a job half the distance from Tulsa. So I took that job, and I wasn't tenured. So I was only there 2 years in Claremore. And Christmas of, I don't remember what year it was, they were cutting 39 teachers.
Wow.
And they said, if you're not tenured, if you haven't been here 3 years or more, and you're early on teacher, whatever, we're going to cut you loose. You got to teach till May to finish out your contract, but you might look for other employment. And that put me on a trajectory that put me in a path of like, okay, I've got a couple of houses. And I think I had 4 or 5 houses at that point that the bank would slowly, like once a year, once every 2 years, allow me to go buy a house. And I'm like I save like I'm broke, right? Like I still continue to spend like my first year teaching. I just
I love that.
$100 a year Anyway,
that's so real estate investor mindset. I mean, it's like
yeah,
save, buy another
yeah,
house, save, buy another house. As soon as I can afford anything, I'm going to buy a house with it. I love
yeah.
that.
Well, I look at almost anything I do. Like if I got a commission, I'm like, oh man, that's that's a down payment for my next
100%.
house. Yeah. So this was like December of, let's call it 2015. And I was like, crap, like, man, I got to go figure out a different, like the superintendent saying, if you like education, you need to get in a different field. And I was like, wow. So my mom was working at the time. She was doing the title work and receptionist for a company called Marine Max, which is it's funny because my name's in it, but I had no ownership of it. It's a corporate company out of Clearwater, Florida, and so we had a location in Grand Lake. So I met her boss, and he's in sales, and he calls me one day and says, "Man, I think you'd be really good at sales." And I was just like, "Dude, I don't care for sales at all." I thought of car sales guys. Like I go to dealerships on Sunday because I don't want to be bothered. And so this is December of 15. I walk in and I take every brochure of every boat they had. And I went on a 10-day vacation. I took my parents on a vacation to Florida. And I mean, I memorized everything I could, every aspect, because I didn't know how to get into sales.
Sure.
So boat show of 2016 starts like early January. And my boss, he's my best friend now at the time. He says, man, he said, give it 90 days, give it 120 days. And he says, if you hate it, go do something else. I made in that first weekend, I made 15 grand. I made half of my teacher's salary in one weekend on boats. And I was like, I'm hooked. I'm hooked. And so anyway, I ended up making really good money.
The funny thing about sales is there's two approaches. The used car salesman approach, which is really pushy and terrible. And then there's just providing a service. It's helping somebody understand what you can do for them, what the fair exchange of value is. And I think back to when I was doing sales at Keyrenter. I did sales for a bunch of years and I loved it. It was awesome. It's just telling people what you do and how you do it. It's kind of, lifting the Komodo, so to speak, or kimono, whatever it is. Komodo, I guess, is a dragon. It's like lifting up the kimono and saying, this is what we do. Do you want it or do you not want it? And I loved sales so much. And it was only, I remember the phone would ring at like 11 o'clock at night from somebody calling in and wanting our property management services. And I was like, I would go spring to life and I would just sell our services. And it was great. But my wife was like, we have twins on the way. You cannot be answering the phone at 11 o'clock or midnight. We're sitting here on the couch watching a movie. Like, that's not the case. And I handed it over. I hired a salesperson, Lisa Goins, who's now with Steady Rock or something. She did 3 years with us and Solid Rock. And she's awesome. I love her so much. I got an email from her yesterday, but like losing the sales in our business was, it just was devastating for me. I loved it so much. So if you're naturally just good with people and you can just be honest and tell people what they can expect, and then you deliver that service, it's a wonderful thing. If you're trying to sell, if you're a snake oil salesman or a used car salesman, it's terrible.
Yeah. No, I think you gotta love what you're selling. Right. And my favorite thing is I would tell these people, I'm like, man, I'm not selling tires or chemicals. Like, I'm selling an experience, right? And we had this conversation before this started, and like I know your father-in-law, and those are all wonderful memories because it's not about so much the product, it's the experience that you get from that product, and that's what I fell in love with. And so when you can sell that, I think it just naturally comes out of you, like, man, this is what I want, So I'm with you on the sales. So I guess, like, to go further on how did we're talking about real estate and I'm talking about boats and wrestling. Well, here's where all this stuff really gets put together. And so my boss, like I said, it's somebody I very well, I respect him. And one of the first things he taught me, his dad was a pastor at a church. And he told me, he said, always do the right thing. He said, you're going to have opportunities in this business to where you could absolutely knock someone's head off on a deal. And he said, I'm going to tell you this. He said, you're going to want to do business with these people multiple times, whether it's this year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever. And he said, you're going to want that repeat business and you're going to want that loyalty. He said, no matter what, always do the right thing. And I'm like, man, that's powerful, And so anyway, I kind of lived by that. And I looked up to this guy and I was like, man, this is a really, really good dude. So going back to like that W-2 of like from 2011 to 16, 15, 16, whatever, when I was teaching, my W-2 is low 30s, right? Which was way less than what I was making at WWE, way less than what I was making as an accountant. But it was comfortable, and that's what I was going to do till my 60s. And so when a banker, is going to finance you for properties and they see that you only make $30,000 a year and you got a couple of houses, you are a major risk.
Yeah.
Like they're like, there's no way you can pay this back. And so my first full year, they're still like, hey, I want 2 years to know that this guy is good at sales. And so I found a great deal in a house, and what a great deal looked like back then would be, let's say 31st and Yale, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car, worth 140, 150, and I bought it for 80. Right?
Yeah.
Home run deal.
Seems like a great deal.
So a great deal, right? Those are the deals like the house behind me that I will never sell. And so anyway, so the moment I buy that house, what happens next? Another one just like that pops up, right? Because this is 2016, 2017. So what do you do?
Those are the days.
Yeah, you call your bank, you're like, man, can I get another one? No, Max. Like, nope, next year. So the next thing you do is like, well, I got to go find the money, right? So I asked Chris Bird, which is he was the general manager of MarineMax. He is my best friend, my mentor, I owe him the world.
Yeah.
So I'm in the office and I talk in real estate every single day, even though I'm selling boats. And he hears me and we talk about it. And I'm talking about my rentals. And I said, Chris, I'm going to ask you a question. Can I borrow $100,000? And what do you think he said?
Let's do it.
Not no, but heck no. No way. Yeah. And I said, well, man, I'll pay you back in 60, 90, 120 days. My bank will only let me do this, And so he's like, but he thought about it. He's like, man, like you talk about real estate all the time. You're very passionate about it. How can we figure this out?
But wait. Let me understand your thought going into it. You said, look, give me 100 grand. I will buy a house, renovate it, refinance it, and then I'll pay you back with the refinance funds. Okay, got it. I'm with you now.
Yeah.
So the bank wouldn't, but the risk perspective of the bank was, I don't trust you to buy, renovate, and rent this thing. But if it's already rented and it covers debt service 1.25 or whatever it is, I feel comfortable with that scenario.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. They just didn't want me to have too many
unrented homes.
Yeah, too many homes out there, and where people get hurt, especially in an economy like we're about to face as we're going right now, is you get too spread out, too thin,
right?
And then you got too many bills coming in, you run out of cash, everybody's holding tight to their cash, and then you lose everything instead of just one, right? So that's what I'm sure the bank was probably trying to be cautious with me. Hey, he's mid-20s, late 20s, whatever. Let's be careful with this guy.
Do you still work with the same bank?
Yes, actually. Yeah, I've got 2 banks to bounce off of. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so that was another thing. I'll get into the so Chris ends up saying, hey, I make a sizable income. I would really like to offset my taxes. How could we do this together? And I said, well, man, a really good idea that we started thinking of, because before then it was always just me, right? It was always just like Max and Max only, and it was only my ideas.
Yeah.
When I said, Chris, you and I can both do this together. So he took a piece of property that was paid off. I took a piece of property that was paid off, went to that bank, used those as lines of credit, and then we went nuts. I mean, we came up with a formula of how we buy properties, because he asked me, he said, well, how do you buy a property, Max? I'm like, I don't know. If it looks like a good deal, I buy it. So I didn't have a really reason of what I was doing. So we came up with a formula, and we never paid $1 more than what our formula, what the math made sense to, right? And it was basically a 10% return, a 10 cap is how we based it.
Yeah.
And if these houses didn't produce a 10 cap, we wouldn't even go look at them. And if there was we would lose houses for $1,000. If our top dollar was 50 grand and it sold for 51,000, we walked away. But we just never, ever towed that line,
But so the idea is it's a 10% cap rate. So your NOI over your asset value had to be 10%. How would you estimate, for example, repair costs? How would you estimate, I guess taxes are easy. A bunch of the stuff is easy, but if you get into a house that needs repair, were you pretty spot on at estimating repair costs? Or did it ever go over and you're like, I'm at a 9 cap because ultimately the asset value is, or what I've got in it cash wise is more, or my ongoing expenses are higher because I didn't do the renovation that I needed to do or whatever?
Yeah. So I'll just break it out for you. This is some deep secrets, and you can't really get these. It's very hard to get these deals now.
Super.
So what we would look for is we would basically do this. We would try to find $100,000 house and pay $60,000 or less.
Yeah.
Right. And that's move-in ready. Right.
Wow.
And if it needed some work, a new kitchen, a new bath, or something like that, then we're probably buying at 50 grand or less. Right. So what that ends up being, it's a whole lot of no's, right? This is speed dating. This is, making a ton of offers. You're getting a few people that say yes. And the different side of it too is cash, right? So many people I've run into this are like, oh, I've got cash. And then they're going to go call a hard money lender that's going to give them cash in 30 days. Well, that's not cash.
Yeah.
Like my offer, generally the people that say yes on a cash offer want that cash yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to, generally we would make offers on properties that we knew the area inside and out. Like I said, I never cross Admiral, never have, never, I'll never say never will, unless it was just handed to me. But we would be south of Admiral, and let's just say from Lewis down to Mingo, right? Yeah. Maybe up to 51st, 61st.
Good investor area.
We knew those areas like the back side of our hand. We knew exactly. We would always, if we were going to rent something, if the market was 11 or 1200, we're at 1,000. Mm-hmm. Like we don't want this thing sitting on the market, mm-hmm. right? We want it snatched up quick. And then if we really, really needed to dig in, if there was foundation issues or something like that, we would hit that price a little harder just because we don't want anything that's going to bust our 10% return. So the math side of it would be, we would back into it based off the rent. So let's say rent was $1,000. We had basically 40% is what we had for taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, vacancy. We did like 5% for vacancy and all that kind of stuff. So we figured all that kind of stuff in there. So that's kind of how the math was. I'll have to write it all out for you. So I'm not on the spot and kind of give you an idea, but we would have to cash flow $250 to $300 a month minus all taxes, insurance, mortgage, all that kind of stuff. And if it didn't give us that type of return, we didn't touch it. Because it's not worth it. Like I'm not buying a house just to break even. Yeah. Yeah. And we were all on 20-year loans, 20-year commercial loans, 5-year ARM, 20% down, that kind of stuff. And the difference too, we would be able to buy, if we bought a house really, really well, let's say we bought a $150,000 house, and we paid 80 for it. Well, you got instant equity. You take 150, hit that 80%, the bank's cutting you a check. And that was happening a lot. 17, 18, it started fading away in 19. And then what happened is the banks started saying, oh, you bought that house for 80. Yeah, I know it's worth 200, but you only paid 80. So we're going to give you 80% of the 80. So they were just trying to protect themselves. They're insulating themselves. So another tactic, I never ever, this is all a math game, right? Like I said, my degree's in accounting. Chris Bird, his job, he had 30 employees, and his job was to pay attention to a P&L of a $50 million store, right? Wow. So like he is really, really tight on the details. And so we were very analytical. So we never, ever, bumped our number. If
let emotion get into it.
Yeah, no emotion. This is all math. If the math doesn't make sense, you don't buy. And so what ended up happening, Matt, was, we took that $300,000 of lines of credit, 150 for me and 150 for Chris. And we ended up buying 35 houses in just under 3 years. Wow. So from let's call it late 2016, 2017, and just under 3 years, we had 35 houses, and our plan was 30. I'll never forget the first house we bought, 227 South Pittsburgh. And we bought that house, and we sat down at Mexicali border at Cherry Street, and him, his wife, and I were like, oh my gosh, we only need 29 more. We were so pumped up. And then we got to 35, and it's like, now what? What do we do? And I'll tell you, Matt, like our plan was buy and hold. Yeah. Like we're never going to sell ever. And plans change sometimes.
So you buy the 35, you have a couple on your own. So you're sitting at 40 houses, 45 houses in partnership or whatever. What's your next move?
I don't know. I mean, so you get to the goal, and then you're like, now what? Right. So now we got to come up. We're not just going to sit at home and do nothing, you know. We had a good amount of, like a really large amount of cash flow coming in. So I ended up paying attention to like multifamily, right? Because you got to like, what's next? What's your next scale up? There's a 42 unit called Wood Hollow, 5962 East 33rd Court. So basically 33rd and between Sheridan and Yale. Yeah. And that thing sat on the market in 2019. It sat on the market for 9 months. And from the house I live in, I kept a property as a rental I was living full time at Grand Lake, but I kept the one in Tulsa at 31st and Darlington. And so it was walking distance. I could walk this thing, and I walk a lot just because I'm always like paying attention to properties and stuff. And I'd walk it and walk it and walk it. I'm like, Chris, man, I really want to buy this. It was $1.8 million. And I really, really wanted it. And it sat on the market forever. And then I took it down to, there was a real estate investor. Are you checking it out online?
No, I'm looking at an email that I've got to another investor that looked at it for a while in 2019 in August. You must have bought it in September, October of 2019.
Yes.
Because I say Tom wanted to introduce you to Robert, Keyrenter COO, responsible for day-to-day operations. He knows the multifamily world well and drove Wood Hollow last week. I've asked him to put his thoughts on paper for you to review. And then Robert runs a whole analysis of the property. Really funny.
Home run, man. So here's the deal. I want to say the one bedrooms were like, I can't remember, $475 or $500. They were cheap for one bedroom. But all the units had washer dryer inside.
Wow.
And then I want to say the two bedroom, they were massive units. And anyway, so we came in there. I think we spent $90,000 on mostly wood rot, updated LED lighting and stuff like that. And I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, I want to say it was 12, maybe 15 months or something like that. We had an unsolicited offer. We were going to keep it for a long time. The scary part was the down payment was $600,000. 30% down. I mean, that's a whole lot of money. I remember that was like, do we do this? We're pushing all of our chips in, right? We still had the 35 houses, right? Incredible cash flow coming in. I'm selling a ton of boats. We're making good money, but like if there was any kind of hiccup, we could have been toast, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we buy it. The thing is cash flowing from day one. It's humming along. It was 41 of 42 units. There's always at least one person moving in, moving out, whatever. But it was a fantastic property. So we get an off market offer, like I said, 12, 15 months after we bought it. Around that time, let's say that was 2020. Around that time, I said the COVID hits. There was Bigger Pockets had said something. Brandon Turner had sent out this letter to all his tenants and basically said, hey, totally understand. We got a crazy pandemic going on, but just understand, like, we're here to take care of you, but also rent is due. We still have to pay our mortgages, right? So we sent that out, and maybe one of 34 on our single family houses decided they're going to put their heels in and not pay, right? And everything was going good. So I said, Chris, man, I know we said we're never going to sell. But I said, the price of these houses, when we're buying 50, 60, 70,000 bucks, they're 150, 200. Like, would you mind if I just threw it out there on Facebook and tossed it out there? So I put the whole entire package on Facebook.
Wow.
I wasn't a broker, right? I didn't have my license. I threw it on Facebook because I didn't want to pay a six-figure commission, So I put it on Facebook. It sits out there and I get all the naysayers. Oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. You'll never get it. And about two and a half months later, I get somebody that says, hey, can I dig in a little deeper? Instead of looking at every single house, they looked at 7 or 8, right? They looked at 7 or 8, got back with us and said, man, I like what you got here. I like the number. We came up with a creative deal and went under contract. And I'll be honest with you, 60 days later, I'm like, this deal's not going to happen. Like you never cash your check before it hits the bank, right? And I get a call from my real estate attorney. He calls and says, hey, when do you want to close? And my immediate answer was, on what? On what? Like, what are you talking about? He's like, on your package of houses. And I was like, oh, okay. So we ended up closing and we ended up doing a really, really nice deal. On the back side of it, we did like a $250,000 seller carryback.
Wow.
So in case, we left some money in the deal for that new buyer in case roofs went down or HVACs and stuff like that, And so anyway, so just another way of being creative. And then we 1031 all the rest of those funds into a bunch of multifamily. So we went really, really strong in 2021 with a couple thousand multifamily doors.
So how does it, real quick, how do you structure the owner carryback? Is it a true note that's filed? Is it a contract for deed?
It was a true note that was filed. So my real estate attorney did it. I think it was for 5 years and maybe 5%.
And who do you use? Who do you use as a real estate attorney?
I use True Title. So shout out to David Dreyer. So I'm really loyal. We talk about loyalty when we talk about your father-in-law. I'm the same thing, man. Like if you treat me well, I'll never go anywhere else. Yeah. The same bank. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to shout out to Jeff Howell. He's at RCB Bank in Claremore. He's like, I think now branch manager or whatever. I mean, he's a big dog. So when I was teaching school back in 2013, 2014, I remember being told, like, you need a solid banker who's got you. Like, this is part of your team. Same thing with the real estate attorney. So I remember meeting Jeff Howell, and at the time, I think I had 4 or 5 houses. And I come in, I hear about this word called leverage. And so I walk in, I was like, "Hi, Jeff, nice to meet you. I'm a school teacher. And by the way, guess what? I've got 4 or 5 houses." He's like, "Fantastic. Love to help you." He said, "Bring in your taxes and we'll go from there." So I bring in my taxes and we go look at it, and he looks through them. And then you could tell like what the question is in his face. He says, "Where are your houses on here?" And I was like, "Jeff, I keep all these in cash, you know?" And he's like, in the nicest way possible, these might not be his exact words, but we laugh about this. "Max, you're an idiot. Report the cash that you're getting on these houses, put them on your taxes, and come back to me in a year." Right.
Yeah.
So a year later, that's when he started basically allowing me to buy a house a year. And so anyway, I still use Jeff to this day.
RCB's a great longstanding bank. I mean, Frank Robson's he's been around for a long time. A friend of mine's on the board of that bank. And we've had a great opportunity to go out and chat with those guys up in Claremore. They're just an honest group of hardworking folks, and I love that.
Well, and I met Frank Robson actually. I won. This is totally random. When I was teaching in Claremore, they put me on top of what's it called, academic team. I didn't even know what it was, and I told them I didn't want it. And I took a team, and I didn't. You know, these guys were way smarter than me. They're just academic all-stars, and I helped them win a state championship. And I got Coach of the Year.
Wow.
And so that got the attention in the newspaper of Frank Robson, and we had coffee and
such a nice guy,
wonderful guy. You know, and I mean it's Walmart backed. You know, I mean basically it's Rogers County Bank, it's Robson Property. Anyway, it's a big deal, and they do things right. And so I've used RCB, like I said, for 10 years or plus now. And anyway, great guys. I also use Chris had a contact with what's it called? Oklahoma State Bank out of Langley, Bonita area.
Never heard of them.
Cool. Yeah, Oklahoma State Bank. And so we would use Oklahoma State Bank on some deals, and we'd use RCB on some deals. And what's funny is our bank good friend, his name's Sean Taylor. He moved from Oklahoma State Bank to Arvest in Miami. So I use him for a lot of stuff. And so I don't keep everything with just one bank. So I kind of like check the rates on both of them, and both of them know each other, and both of them know that I'm looking for the best deal.
Yeah.
So RCB actually ends up buying out Oklahoma State Bank and just swallow them up. And so they're growing, they're doing well. But anyway, so bankers, real estate attorneys, I mean, you got to build your team. And then I've got an insurance company, Joe Howard at Shelter Insurance in Broken Arrow. He did me a favor 10 years ago in a house, and I've never had a claim, knock on wood, since. And he's had hundreds of properties with me. So anyway, so I'm super loyal, and I think loyalty goes a long way, especially when you're building a real estate empire, I guess you'd say.
It's so important to have your bankers, your insurance guys, your attorneys on standby, because they're a critical part of your team. And David Charney, who sits on RCB's board, was a mentor of mine, and he said early on, he was like, have a good group of bankers, have your financials in order, dress appropriately, go in there and make an impression, and then you're welcome to shop banks. But I think his perspective is, I'm not, and he would never say this, but he's like, I'm not whoring around for rates. He's like, I might be negotiating different terms. Can you give me 7-year fixed? Can you give me 10-year fixed? Or can you go a little higher LTV or a little lower LTV, whatever's important to him. And, the rate is one element of many parts of a loan. You talked about a 20-year AM with a 5-year ARM. Can you do a 25-year AM? Anything that can help out in various circumstances, because every deal is different. And making sure that you've got good relationships, and that you're not, coming in right when you need cash for the first time saying, I'm desperate, can you help? That's not the way you want to be. So yeah, the same thing with your title folks, the same thing with your attorneys. Like you want to have people that know your business and know you well, so that they're, willing to help you out. Maybe you can call in a favor because you've been doing business a long time.
100%. No, and bankers, like I said, it's the foundation. You got to be able to have them, or get the money, or access the money. And I remember many days in the past, where a deal would pop up, and we wouldn't. I mean, there'd be days we would buy houses and we'd never even see them. We just knew what the price was, and we would know that. I mean, even if the thing needed to be bulldozed, we're buying it. It's just too good of a deal.
Yeah.
And so when we're up there at Grand Lake and we're selling boats, and we don't have time to drive an hour and a half into Tulsa to go find this property, we had such a good relationship with both RCB and Sean Taylor at Oklahoma State, whatever. we had such a good relationship, multiple deals, and they knew how we bought. And it'd be like, Sean, man, I need 100 grand. And it would be a thumbs up emoji, right?
Wow.
Like, go get the deal. Banks now call and be like, hey, what are you buying? Hey, I got an incredible deal. And so like there'd be like rate sheets and term sheets that we would get that most normal people wouldn't get because they knew how we buy. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, there was one probably last year, like when everything was 5.5%, 6%, and it was like 4%, 10-year fixed. I mean, it was insane. And it was, but they would have the cookie cutter, and this was RCB, and be like cookie cutter of a certain like piece of commercial real estate that they want you to buy. And so anyway, those type of relationships are just invaluable.
What are you thinking now that interest rates are up at 8.25 commercial? I mean, what are you doing?
Don't get me started, man. So I stopped buying single family stuff. 2021 for sure. And it wasn't until like the middle of 2022 that I started buying some of my own, right? I started going back to just buying single family houses individually. But what would happen is I would have former sellers that still had like a family of properties. Yeah. And if something, if they just wanted some cash or whatever, hey, I want to go buy a new vehicle for my wife, they'd say, hey, Max, do you want this one? Yes. Like for instance, let me give you an example. A friend of mine calls, boat customer, friend of mine calls, I'm at the lake. He says, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car, 1,400 square foot, $56,000. Take it or leave it.
Oh my God. Done.
Yeah. And I started to ask, like, can you send me a picture? And his response was, Max,
take it or leave it.
The next person that I call is going to say yes. And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. Right. And anyway, so that was a matter of I got cash and I can move quick. And anyway, so I'm not a big guy on flips. Recently, I've done a handful of flips. So my portfolio of rentals is starting to grow again. But like I said in the past, 90 days, I probably had 8 home run deals, like deals you would have never seen in 2021, 2022. Wow. Like I bought a 250 at the lowest, $270,000 house, Briarwood, right? So 38th between Memorial and Mingo. I looked at all the comps in the area. There's two houses down that sold this year for $255,000. I just bought for 105.
Why are people selling them for 105 when they can go to the MLS and just list them?
Well, I mean, this one obviously it's not move-in ready, right? So it's got a newer roof, newer HVAC. It's got wood paneling on the inside. It probably needs a couple of years, but it's not $150,000 worth of work. You know, so there's plenty of equity. The other side of it is we don't know like what the push is on the back. Maybe it's a family member that wants funds, and maybe it whatever. We got to sell this and split it up or whatever. But the difference too is like they don't probably have the money to go out there and put the rehab into it, right? Nor the time. And they're realizing that 8%, like the value has to go down, right? And so I don't know if it's going to go back down to like it was in 07, 08, 09. But the prices have to go down. And so I'm seeing a lot of prices drop. And that's kind of what I chase. If somebody says, Max, what do you do on a daily basis? I look at price drops. And I hope nobody listens to this because that's all I do. I look at price drops and I kind of watch a pattern. And then I start seeing motivated sellers and I start chasing after that stuff. And then to be honest with you too, I've been in the market. I've been doing this since 2007. I've got to the point where literally people reach out to me.
Wow.
Right. Our connection was from Kathy. Kathy's like, hey, I know this is kind of what you're doing. And so then people just start coming out to you. When you've had time in the seat, people start coming at you. Yeah. I've been out of boat sales for 2 years. I sold a boat 2 months ago to a guy that I'd sold a boat 6 years ago. Right. It's time in the seat. He said, I don't care I don't know who's there now, but he's like, I want to use you. Yeah. Right. I got commissioned on from a different company, from one of the companies I didn't work for, but they knew I brought the relationship and I brought the sale,
Yeah. Beautiful.
So I'm excited as heck right now, just because the rates are higher. People know that prices have to come down and they're starting to. I'm seeing a softening in, 200,000, 250 and less. That's where I'm seeing it. You're still going to have that brand new house. Let's call it the 300 to 450 range is still pretty solid.
Yeah.
Anything above that softening, I'm starting to see just in the market. But if it needs a lot of work, there's less people that have cash. And
what you're finding?
What I'm finding is true people that have cash, and it doesn't take 30 days to get it or whatever. If you have cash and you can move right now, you're going to get a deal.
Interesting. Yeah. So you have excitement about the upcoming, the notion that a lot of loans are maturing and people are going to have to drop prices to sell and get out of bad problems. What is keeping you up at night? Do you have fears or anxiety about anything in the market or your business or anything else?
No. So there's always fears, right? And what I like about real estate, and I can go to Vegas, right? And I can go to Vegas and not spend any money gambling. I'm just not a gambler. I take calculated risk.
Yeah.
So anything that I do is a calculated risk, right? So if I buy this house, it's 105 grand. I know that it's not going to take me 145 grand
sure.
to rehab the house, right? So I'm not stressed on that. What would be keeping me up? I got a phone call shortly after this with a CPA I've made too much money this year. And that's not a good problem or bad problem. It's when I was talking to my CPA the other day, they're like, man, you got a lot of short-term capital gains, right? And there's really no way to, not a lot of good, smart ways to be able to wipe that away. And if I look at my tax bracket, the way I'm looking at it, I'm probably paying 35%, right? I don't like giving up half of what I make.
No,
right?
Absolutely
Those are too good. So I'll tell you about another deal that I did last year that was just somebody knew me, right? It's people knowing you in the market. The short-term capital gain stuff is in my tax bracket, it's 35%. If I kept it a year and one day, it's 15%, right?
Beautiful.
I would much rather and 15, right? So I'll throw a little deal at you that this was totally random. My girlfriend and I were in Oregon last year for her fall break. She works at a school as a child psychologist. And we're at the Portland airport about to fly home, and I get a random phone call, and I always answer my phone. No matter what, if I don't answer, I'm going to call you back, or I respond within 24 hours. That's just something that I learned selling boats. I remember you said something about 11 o'clock at night. I took a 10:45 p.m. on a Friday night text message from a guy.
Yeah.
And I responded to him. And if I wouldn't have responded to him, Wes or somebody else in the office would have gotten that lead, right? Yeah. I responded to him. The very next morning, the dude walks in. It was a $20,000 commission.
Wow.
Boom. And I'm like, that's what you get for responding. Like, it's not always that size of a dollar amount, but I was like, this is why you respond. So I get a phone call in the airport, probably not an opportune time, but I answer, and they're like, hey, the city of Tulsa says you'll buy almost anything, right? Like you bought burnout houses, you'll do whatever.
Wow, the city of Tulsa's throwing your name around. Love that.
Some houses, right? Yeah. But you treat people well and you do good things. And so I get a phone call and they're like, well, I don't know if they're really, really, really bad, but they're near to you. Would you consider looking? So I'm like, yeah, I'll be home tomorrow, 4:00. Let's go look at it. And so I'm doing my research on it or whatever. And they are bad, like really, really bad. When me and you catch up, I'll show you pictures. These were like some of the most awful houses I've ever seen, but they were on 4th facing TU. Like,
okay. Wow.
Facing.
Yeah.
I mean, they were like, across, like if I walk 10 feet across the street, there's like 10 houses they bulldozed, and it was a TU parking lot for students.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, all right. So I typed up a contract, right? I typed up a contract of what I was willing to pay. Most I was willing to pay, right? The lady selling them, I'm meeting straight with the owner. And that's what I liked about face-to-face. If I can talk face-to-face with the check writer or who I'm dealing with, I have a better chance of getting a deal done than messing with a real estate agent. I was always fearful of an agent because the agent's more worried about their bottom line than they care about you getting a deal done.
Sure. And that's, I mean, I think Freakonomics talks about that a little bit, where they're like, the commission, if you're taking 3% and you're splitting that with your broker, you just want the deal to get done. You don't care whether it's top dollar or bottom dollar. It's really, it's a minuscule difference in what you're actually going to get paid in the commission. So you want to just get the deal done. Yep.
So brief story on this one. This was a fun one. Probably one of the best deals, individual, like single family deals I've ever done in my entire life.
Wow.
So I answered the phone. That's one of the home run deals, right? And then I meet these people over, and they're telling me that, well, we got one other guy that's interested. And I'm like, okay. And what I was trying to do is I wanted to be the last one to see him, so my offer would stand, right?
Yeah.
So I go in there, and before I pull up, I got my contract typed up, exactly what I want. I'm buying both houses. I look at the first house, and it's furthest from TU, but it's I'll give you the addresses later, but it's house TU. So I'm looking at the first interior. House needs a ton of work. I'm like, I bet you it needs $100,000, right? I walk in it. Nobody's been in it for 10 plus years. There's garbage, cat litter boxes, whatever, waist high throughout the whole house. Yeah. Wood rot on the outside, roof, everything. I'm just like, this is the worst thing ever. While I'm leaving that house, I do have my gun on me just in case. As I'm leaving that house and the other house that's facing TU, a homeless man walks out the front door and goes to the backyard and was like, willy-nilly, no big deal, waved at us. And I'm just like, man. So we're going through the house, the electricity and water's on in this house. And I'm looking at the owner and I'm like, why do you have the electricity on? And they're like, well, for the security system. I'm like, for the security system for this homeless guy to live in. So anyway.
He's the security system.
Yeah. So after that, I'm sitting there. I go back to my truck and I'm like, oh my God, this is like way worse than I expected. So I go back and I go to my contract and I delete the number that I had in there and I drop it by a considerable number, like lower than what I was going to offer. And this is different. This is when you have cash, you can do this, right?
Yeah.
This is not like, hey, I think I've got cash. I'm going to go call Matt and see if I can borrow $100,000 from him. Like I had it set in the bank. I handwrite a check. And I write it to my title company, not to an individual. So I write the full amount that I changed that contract to, put the date on it, folded it in half, and I walked back to these people and I said, listen, these houses are in horrible condition. You know it. And they're like, yeah, we agree. And I said, you got somebody that has now, that you got another buyer potentially that's going to come in behind me. They're going to see it tomorrow. And I said, what's going to happen is I'm going to make you an offer right now. And that person's going to take, they're going to find out what my offer is through you. And you're going to tell them, and they're going to offer $5 or $10,000 more than me. And I said, that's unfair to me, right? So I said, I'm going to make you an offer, and it's for tonight only. It's done at 11 o'clock. I'm going to make you a cash offer. And I said, what happens is I'm going to take this pain away from you. This pain of this house sitting empty with all the crap and all the junk inside of it, that becomes mine. That homeless guy that's sitting in the backyard who's living in your house, that's my problem, right? And I said, I can make all this go away. And I handed them a check. They opened it. And it was like kind of a little bit of a surprise. And they walked back and they said, can I have just a few minutes to talk to my partner? They came right back and said, we'll take your deal. I couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, the joy inside of like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So I was like, man, that's a heck of a deal. Now comes the work, right? So I'm like, do I keep these things? I can make X number of dollars, all that kind of stuff. But it was so much going on. At the time, I had 2 houses I was building in Grand Lake, first 2 houses I've ever built in my life. And so I didn't want to pull my guys off of the houses on Monkey Island. And I was like, man, so I called my guys. I said, man, I need you guys for one day, 8 hours, whatever you're going to charge me. And I'm going to be there with you for 8 hours where I clean these houses out. Because I was like, what's the best way to sell these things? Do I sell them full of crap? Or do I sell them needing a lot of work, but take all the crap out?
Yeah.
So we spent 8 hours and filled 2 30-yard dumpsters in one day. I mean, we didn't stop. And that day I had posted, I think it was the night before, I had posted them up for sale. I found out what the market, the cheapest house in that market near TU was for $185,000, cheapest house, needed work. And so I decided to put mine underneath that value, right? And I put them up for sale individually. I took a screenshot of TU, of the parking lot right next door, all that kind of stuff. And I put them out there for a price. Like, this is the price. No less will I take. I got 42 phone calls that day when we were cleaning out. The battery ran out of my headphones, my earphones, whatever. My AirPods were like, no more. And one of the first guys that called me was like, I'll give you full price today, both houses. And I was like, no, right? And I'm pissed that I said no. But what happens when you have 42 offers? It means you priced it too low.
Yeah.
Right. And so I knew I was
seller's remorse.
Yeah. So I started backpedaling. I was like, man, I need to do something. So take these off the market or something. But this was like a Thursday going into a Monday. And so I was like, crap. Like I just knew no was the answer. And so I tried to regroup. I'm like, okay, maybe I take these off the market and then 2 weeks later or something like that. But I remember thinking like, this homeless guy's going to come back. He's going to be my problem. I got to figure this out. So I get a phone call again that following Monday. And one of the guys who called me says, hey, what's it going to take to buy your houses? And I said, man, just to be honest with you, I said, I don't want to pay the short-term capital gains. I said, well, this is what my short-term capital gain is going to cost, right? And he said, okay, well, let's figure this out. You want to do a contract for deed for 13 months? And I said, sure. He said, okay, what percentage rate? And I said, 8%. Great. His down payment 2 weeks later was half of what I paid for both houses.
Oh my God.
So not only did I get everything I wanted, I got 8%, plus I get a payoff in February of 24.
Wow.
I'm talking biggest 6-figure deal I've ever done in my life. And so those are just little wins, right? And you don't win them all, right? I heard I was at church the other day and I heard this is really, really good. I heard a comment. It basically said, everybody wants to hear your successes. How you connect with people is through your failures, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, it's fun to tell you all about all like the good things I've done. I had a house at 2nd and Urbana that I just wanted to smash my head against the wall hundreds of times. And so you don't win all of them, right? That one was one of those. What I like about real estate, and this is what I'll tell you, even on the losses, they can sometimes become wins. I broke even on that house, and I spent a year renovating it, turning it into do that kind of stuff. It was a net zero waste of time for an entire year. And what I did is, instead of selling it at break even or a loss, I rented it, and I'm going to hold on to it for a long time, and it's going to turn into a win. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I like about real estate. It's very forgiving.
It's super forgiving. Me too. I love the same thing.
And if you don't sell at a loss, you never lose. So
who are your mentors that have helped guide you in some of this journey?
Man, there's a guy named Curtis Twilley. He owns a property. I'm trying to think. It's called the Scandia. Search it up. It's at 31st and Harvard. He turned it into like a retirement center. It is fantastic.
Oh yeah, I know. It's right by Bird and Bottle. It's just south and east of Bird and Bottle. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was waiting tables, I saved $65,000 the 3 years I was in college. So 18, 19, 20, I saved $65,000. I spent no money. I only paid for my car payment, my insurance, and gas. I mean, I didn't buy food. You talked about how much did I weigh when I was wrestling? It was 220. If you asked me how much I weighed when I was in college, it was 120. Like I was skinnier than most of my girlfriends. I just didn't eat, but I saved all my money. And so Curtis Twilley would come in 4 to 5 nights a week. He'd tip me $20 to $25 every time.
Restaurant?
And I would Carrabba's Italian restaurant. Yeah, 48th and Yale.
Is Carrabba's a
Outback Steakhouse?
Yeah, but who owns it?
OSI. It was Outback. It used to be Outback Steakhouse Incorporated.
Got it. Okay, Carrabba's. Okay, good. Yeah. So
you're thinking Johnny.
And I'm thinking of oh my God, his brother bought UFC. He's the biggest restaurateur in America, out of Houston. Anyways, no.
It was Johnny Carrabba. He owned anyway. Houston was the very first Carrabba's. So anyway, so I'm waiting tables. I had a lot of regulars. I had actually regulars that were my regulars from like 2004 that ended up buying boats from me in 2016, 2017, 2018. So that goes back to the relationship part. Yeah. You know, you treat somebody well as a server, and they come up and buy a boat from you. And so it's no longer a $20 tip; it's a $3,000 commission. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's also small and it's all full circle. But yeah, so Curtis Twilley was very important in my life. I would sit down there, like he'd come in late at night, and I'd be asking him questions. Old gray-haired guy, and I'm 20 years old, just trying to learn. And I think I wanted somebody to, like, as a handout, like, hey, help me with a deal.
Sure.
And he would help me with knowledge. And so I'm glad nobody gave me. So I was glad. So I can't just be like, yeah, man, I got into real estate because somebody left me a huge inheritance. Like, never got anything like that. So he taught me a concept of, Max, if you can make money when you sleep, like it just set my mind off. I'm like, okay, if I don't come into Carrabba's, somebody else gets Curtis as a regular, right? So if I'm sick, I'm still coming in because I want to get that $20, $25 tip. But if I can get that $25 tip and I'm sleeping in bed or I'm sick or whatever, and he starts telling me about the reoccurring revenue and on the first of every month you get paid, I'm like, oh man, I like that. So that's really what set me in the direction of real estate.
Interesting. I mean, so it was the concept that he shared with you that's making money in your sleep. It could have been, I mean, you could have owned anything that made money while you sleep. Realistically,
you could have, yeah. But he
was a real estate guy.
He was a real estate guy. Yeah. And he got in the 80s when things were really, really cheap. If you went and saw the price he paid for the Scandia, it would blow your mind.
Wow.
Like it's like we talk 10x. It's way beyond that.
Wow.
Man, other things that I listen to sometimes, like motivationally, like this is going to sound weird, but I don't eat, breathe, and sleep everything Grant Cardone talks about. But like he's got a couple things that he'll say. I've read 10x, and that's great. But he'll say sometimes just show up. Like just show up. And then the other side of it, like I'm obsessed. I don't know the best way to say it. I wake up and it's like, what's the next deal? Like I'm gonna make a couple $100,000 on a real estate deal, and I'm like, great, cool, what's next?
Yeah.
And that's where my mind is at. I don't think like I'm one of those guys that I'm always going to keep growing, right? You're planning to get 30 houses, and then you get to 30 houses, and you're like, now what? Now what's next? So. Anyway, man, what about yourself? What was your influence and what got you in real estate?
Oddly enough, this is a very strange story. But somebody said to me, I had two friends. One is a private equity guy, and he was like talking about his K1s. And I was like, what's a K1? And he was like, what? What's a K1? And I was like, I better figure out what a K1 is. Andrew Carrion, he worked for a long time at Riverstone Capital, and I was ventured off and has raised, I don't know, a few $100 million for his own fund that's doing energy investment. He's done some amazing stuff. A friend of mine from middle school and high school, and who once, when I introduced him once as a friend of mine from high school, he was like, dude, we are friends now. Was not your friend in high school. I am your friend now. So he got really offended. We were in Indy together hiking. And then I had a friend's uncle who was like, you don't own real estate? And I was like, no. He's like, you don't own real estate? And I was like, no. And he was like, he like blew his mind that I didn't own real estate. And I was like, I guess I better buy real estate. And so I started sending books home, how to buy real estate for dummies or whatever. My sister opened up a package that I had sent home to my grandparents' house in Florida. And I was like, well, there's my sister opening up my mail. But, she said to me, I've also been thinking about buying real estate. So I was in Dubai at the time. She was in Boulder, where she still is. We started buying real estate in Boulder. And that's, we still have a bunch of them. We've sold a couple 1031 them into like, I think we sold 2 last year, and I 1031 those into 6 houses, 6 new build capital homes. So that was, we had a couple of good deals out there, and we still have some properties. And those have gone. I think our first deal that we ever bought, we bought for $465, bought for $435, and they ended up selling us their solar panels. They forced us to buy the solar panels for $30,000, which made no difference to me because we were renting it. And that property is probably worth $850,000 or $900,000. It's a block and a half from CU Boulder. So real estate's very forgiving. And I'll tell you, we bought that house for $465, and then the back of the house fell off. So we had to rebuild 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, right? Immediately, like $80,000 or something. It was just ridiculous. But I was like, well, anyways, we get almost $5,000 a month in rent for that property today, and our mortgage is, $2,200 or something. So yeah, that's my kind of journey into real estate. And when I moved to Tulsa, I just started looking at real estate and thought, I love real estate. I love the concept, as you said, of getting paid on the first, and arbitrage between your mortgage and your rent payment, et cetera, and the ability to build long-term wealth while somebody else is paying off your principal on your mortgage. So that was my journey. It was fun. It's been fun. I'm also a deal junkie. So if you see a good deal, you nab it, always.
What got you to Tulsa? What brought you to Tulsa?
My wife's family's been here since '59. So my father-in-law is a huge proponent of Tulsa. It's a great place to live. Tulsa's a wonderful place to be. But my wife was living in LA. I was living in Dubai. She said, if I'm going to go anywhere, I'm going to go back to Tulsa. I came February of 2017. It was like 40 degrees and sunny, and I was like, I'm in. Let's do this. It just seemed like there was opportunity and a good quality of life. So I was like, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Houston. So Tulsa and Houston, despite the size and economy are different, but it's culturally very similar. Kind of an oil town, built on the intrepid spirit of wildcatting, et cetera. So it's cool.
Yeah. My aunt lives in Baytown, and reminds me, I got to call her. She sent me a text yesterday, so I need to call her. But yeah, I used to go to bed to Houston all the time, Woodlands and Katy and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I know we got to probably finish up here at a point, but I think part of what got us here in this talk was like creative financing, and that kind of talk. And I'll just kind of give you a little bit of an idea briefly of what I'm doing right now. So I had done a couple contract for deeds, and basically buying a house, selling it to somebody else, and then carrying the note, right?
Yeah.
So owner financing, whatever you want to call it. Owner carry is what my grandma used to call it. But when I first got started, I bought my first house in cash. I bought my second house with a mortgage, and then I went to go buy house number 3. I had a buddy say, "Hey, you're in real estate, right?" Yes, absolutely, I am. So I tried to get a mortgage for this third house, and it was a union school district, great home, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2/3 of an acre. They wanted $100,000 basically, but the appraisal was at 130, and they just didn't want to mess with it. They just said, "Hey, if you can give me $100,000, great." And I said, "Well, Kathy, I can't." And it was a good friend of mine's mom, and I said, "Well, they were retiring." And I said, I can't get you a full $100,000, but I said, "I got 33,000 saved." And I said, "Would you carry the note? I'll give you interest that basically hits you at $100,000, and I'll pay it off in 6 years." And she's like, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, Kathy, if I fail to pay you past this $33,000, you not only get to keep every payment, you get to keep the 33,000 plus the house, and they can resell it to somebody else." And she's like, "Well, I don't think I could really lose." And she said, "Well, let's try it." So on top of that, just so that she had confidence in me, I wrote 72 checks.
Wow.
Yeah. And inside the contract for deed, I put, if I die, my estate's going to pay you. Like, it's just, you're going to. And so she's like, "I trust you." 2018, she sends me a Facebook message. She's like, "Hey, I'm casting your last check. I can't believe this has happened. And what a great ride. And I'm thankful that you're promised." And so now what I do is I do this for other people. So I had done a couple over the years of like ones, a house I didn't want for, let's say 30 or 40 grand. I'd buy it at 4th and Memorial, and I didn't want it. I put it out there for sale, and somebody'd say, "Yeah, 60 grand and 6,000 down. Sure, I'll do it." And there's really no, if I bought it at 40 grand, 6,000, I'm at 34,000 is all I'm into the house. If I get it back at 34 grand, I'll sell it again, you know? So I started doing that. And so that's kind of what I'm doing heavily right now. I've got one guy that's buying a lot of property from me, and he's kind of using me as like a quick hard money lender ish. I make my fee essentially. And then if I finance the property, let's say rates are 8, let's say my commercial rate is 8, and I'll charge him 10. I'll charge him 2 points over. If I don't refinance the house and I'm just floating it in my back pocket, then I'm making 10% what's that called? Untethered or whatever.
Unlevered.
Unlevered, yeah.
Yeah. But let me ask you this: if your rate changes, if your ARM adjusts, how do you adjust that on the contract for deed?
I'm not. I'm giving them a fixed rate. I'm being really nice. A couple of things on my contract for deeds is like my rate's fixed, right?
Yeah.
So if I say, "Hey, man, your rate's 10%, and mine goes up to 14, like I'm out 4%, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that's insulating me is the fact that like I'm putting some kind of fee in there, right?
Yeah.
Some hard money lenders will charge 2% origination fee or something like that. Whatever. Mine's a little bit different than that. I got to make a little bit more money, so I'm not charging an origination fee. I'm not charging a credit check. I don't care for. Don't give me a driver's license, pay stubs. I don't care. I'm going off of trust on your character, who you are, and the fact that if you don't pay, I get the house back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm doing.
You're working that model these days.
I am. Yeah. So I got $600,000 of whatever, they'll call it cash or whatever sitting in the bank, and I'm just rotating that quickly.
Beautiful.
So anyway, so that's what I'm doing.
We've got to do a second episode on that.
Yeah, we totally will.
Go deep. Max McGuirk is a former high school teacher who's been investing in real estate since he was 21 with long-term rentals. He's a serial entrepreneur. He owns and operates a DJ and photo booth company in Tulsa. We didn't even talk about that. That's for the next episode. And was under contract and wrestled for the WWE after college in their developmental territory in Tampa, Florida in 2009 and 10. He joined McGraw Commercial Properties this year, specializing in the disposition, acquisition, and leasing of office buildings, industrial properties. And man, Max, it was an absolute pleasure to pick your brain. You're a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate you being on.
Matt, thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.